I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, spilling his guts on a relationship subreddit, but here I am. It's like my life has turned into some bad soap opera, except I'm not acting. I'm just living through it, and honestly, I don't even know how I got here. It started off simple enough, working my ass off at the construction site all day, coming home to a quiet apartment I thought was mine and Sarah's. Sarah's the sort of girl who always smiled when you looked at her long dark hair, eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets, and a laugh that somehow made the whole world seem lighter. We'd been together for 4 years, and I'd started picturing the future with her. A small house, maybe a dog and me finally calming down after chasing dreams that never quite panned out. Then came the proposal. I'd been planning it for weeks, saving up my money, making sure everything was perfect. I even bought her a ring that cost more than I wanted to admit, but she loved it. I remember the way her eyes lit up when I got down on one knee, like she was the only person in the world. That moment felt like everything I'd been waiting for, until it was. The night before I was supposed to ask her, I flew out to surprise her at her apartment after work. I was buzzing with excitement, practically running up the stairs. When I stepped inside, the place was silent except for the faint hum of the television. That's when I saw her. She was on the couch, tangled up with Jack, the guy I'd trusted more than anyone outside my family. They weren't just sitting close, they were pressed against each other, lips locked, hands roaming. I stood there, stunned, my stomach twisting into a knot so tight it felt like I'd swallowed a brick. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. Jack's hand was on her thigh and she was arching into him like she was desperate for more. I could see the imprint of her fingers on his shirt, that little red mark that said, "I want this." They didn't even hear me at first. I cleared my throat. What the hell is going on here? My voice cracked, but I couldn't help it. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Sarah's eyes flicked up, wide and guilty, and Jack's face turned to stone. "I can explain," Sarah stammered, voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like," I repeated, voice rising. "You're lying on my couch kissing my best friend and you call that not what it looks like? How stupid do you think I am?" Jack finally looked guilty, but Sarah, she just looked scared. Like she knew I'd seen enough to tear her apart. And I did. My hands started trembling, my palms slick with sweat. I felt my jaw tighten. All the good I'd built with her, the trust I'd given her, shattered in a heartbeat. I didn't say a word. I just turned around, my head pounding, my vision blurry. I looked around her apartment, trying to process what I'd seen. I saw the empty wine bottles, the ashtray filled with cigarette butts, and the faint scent of perfume I didn't recognize. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't some one-time slip-up. It was the culmination of red flags I'd ignored for months. The late nights, the secretive texts, the way she'd flinch every time I asked about Jack. I'd been stupid, plain and simple. I'd seen the signs but told myself I was overthinking. But now I knew better. She'd been cheating on me for who knows how long, and Jack was just as guilty. They'd betrayed me in the worst way, right before I was supposed to ask her to marry me. That was the worst part, knowing I'd planned everything, only to find out she'd been lying all along. I left her apartment that night with my stomach churning, hands trembling, and a heavy weight in my chest I couldn't shake. I knew I couldn't just walk away from this. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Some part of me wanted to lash out, to scream, to ruin everything they had. But I knew I had to be smarter. Revenge was coming, and it had to be perfect. But first, I had to understand just how deep the betrayal went, and what kind of game I was really playing now. That's when I started noticing the little things, that a few of my things had been moved, a couple of text messages from Jack that I dismissed as jokes, a scratch on my favorite coffee mug I was sure I didn't do, little signs that this wasn't just a one-time slip. It was a pattern, and I was the fool who hadn't seen it. So now I sit here, typing all this out, feeling like I've been hit by a truck. I'm hurt, angry, and more betrayed than I thought possible, but I also know this isn't the end. I'm not letting her get away with this. Not Jack, not Sarah. I owe them a lesson they won't forget. The morning after I found out, I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. My head was pounding, my stomach was flipping, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that image of Sarah pressed against Jack on her couch. That was burned into my brain like a bad tattoo I couldn't get rid of. I kept replaying it over and over, and the worst part was realizing how deeply I'd trusted her. How blindly I had ignored all the little signs, all the moments I brushed off because I loved her too much to see the truth. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe through the chaos inside my head. My hands were slick with sweat and I kept clenching and unclenching fists. It was like I was fighting myself just to keep from losing it completely. I knew I couldn't just go to her and demand answers. I needed a plan, a way to make her feel what I was feeling: betrayed, humiliated, broken. But before I could do anything drastic, I needed more evidence. I wasn't going to trust my gut alone. I needed facts. So I started digging quietly. I turned on my phone, went through her texts and social media, looking for anything that confirmed what I'd seen. Sure enough, I found a trail. Flirty messages, late-night calls, secret snaps of her and Jack laughing while she hid her phone from view. It was all there. And then I found the real kicker, a picture of them together in her bed. Just a casual shot, but enough to make my blood boil. Her lying there with Jack leaning over her, both of them wearing sleep masks, clearly caught in a moment they thought no one was watching. That was the smoking gun. I printed it out, kept it hidden, and kept digging for ways to use this. In the meantime, I avoided her calls. I didn't want to blow up too soon. I knew I had to be patient, get everything in order. Every time I saw her face, I felt a surge of rage and heartbreak all at once. But I couldn't afford to be reckless. I had to be smart. One evening, I remembered Jack's email. He'd been bragging about some new business venture, but I remembered he'd also mentioned a new girl he was seeing. I decided to check his social media. That's when I saw it: photos from a bar, him with some girl I'd never heard of, and a caption that said, "Best night ever." No mention of Sarah, no explanations. That was enough. I started to piece it together. Jack wasn't just cheating on me with Sarah. He'd been doing it behind my back for months, probably since the start of my relationship with Sarah. All those nights I thought they were just friends, I was wrong. They'd been orchestrating it all, and I was the idiot who didn't see it. I knew I couldn't confront Jack just yet, not without everything in my hands. I had to be careful. If I went in guns blazing, I'd burn everything down and I'd end up with nothing. But I was already planning, mentally, every step I needed to take. The first move was to get actual proof, something I could hold over their heads. I decided to set up a hidden camera in my apartment. Not to catch Sarah or Jack in the act again, that was already clear, but to record their reactions if I ever called them out. I wanted to see their faces when the truth hit them. I wanted to humiliate them properly. While I was setting that up, I also reached out to a private investigator just to cover my bases. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. If Jack or Sarah tried to deny everything, I'd have the evidence. I was going to make sure they knew I wasn't the fool anymore. All of this was happening under the surface as I kept my distance. I didn't want to show any weakness. I was calculating, cold even. But inside, my stomach was twisting harder than ever. Every breath felt like I was inhaling smoke. My chest was tight and my jaw clenched so hard I thought I might break my teeth. The hardest part was the waiting to see what they'd do next, how they'd react when they realized I'd uncovered their game. I kept replaying every moment, their sneaking around, the touches, the lies. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered how I'd ever trust anyone again. And then I knew. I couldn't just wipe the slate clean. They'd taken my love, my trust, and spat on it. They needed to pay. They had to understand what it felt like to be the one left bleeding. That's when I started planning my revenge, something cold, calculated, and final. I wasn't just going to walk away. No, I was going to leave them with scars that wouldn't fade. Now I sit with my phone in my hand, waiting to make the next move. These pieces are falling into place, one by one, and soon I'll give them a taste of what real betrayal feels like. Because if someone hurts you this badly, the only way to heal is to make sure they understand the pain they caused. And I'm about to do just that. The plan started forming in my mind like a dark blueprint. I'd been betrayed so completely that I couldn't just walk away and pretend everything was fine. That wouldn't be enough. I needed them to feel the weight of what they'd done, especially Jack. Sarah, I could almost forgive her in some twisted way. She was caught up in her own mess. But Jack, my best friend, that was a different story. He'd been with me through so much, and then he just threw it all away for her. I spent days watching, waiting, gathering every bit of evidence I could. I kept my distance, but I also started executing my plan. First thing was to get a clean recording of Jack and Sarah. I'd set up a hidden camera in my apartment, pointed at the spot where I knew they'd meet next. It wasn't just about catching them again. I wanted to record their reactions, their words, everything that showed how they really felt. In the meantime, I reached out to a private investigator. Not because I thought I'd need to hide anything, but because I wanted to be sure I had every angle covered. If I was going to do this, I was going all in. I paid extra for footage and reports, and I kept everything discreet. I didn't want them to suspect a thing until it was too late. One night, I got a message from the Pi video footage of Jack and a woman he'd been seeing laughing and holding hands. I watched it, my jaw clenched tight. That was the final confirmation I needed. Jack wasn't just cheating on me with Sarah. He was doing it with someone else behind my back for months. The anger started bubbling up again, sharp and relentless. I could feel it in my chest, a hot surge I couldn't contain. I was ready to confront Jack, but I knew I had to be strategic. I wanted to catch him off guard, make him realize I knew everything. No mercy, just the truth, plain and brutal. Meanwhile, I had already told Sarah I needed to talk. I didn't specify what about, I just said I wanted to clear the air. When she called back, her voice was shaky, like she knew I was onto her. I kept my tone calm, but inside I was boiling. This wasn't about yelling. I wanted her to see me as someone who had everything under control. I had to be the one in power when this was over. The night before our big confrontation, I went out and bought a small gift, a simple, cheap piece of jewelry I could give her, pretending it was just a peace offering. Inside, I knew I wouldn't give it to her, not now. It was more for me, a symbol of how I was going to finally take control, even if it was just symbolic. When she came over that evening, I kept my cool. I watched her walk in, her face pale, eyes avoiding mine. I could see the guilt swimming in her stare, but I didn't say anything yet. Instead, I handed her the small box. "I want to give you this," I said softly, "to remind you of what's real." She looked at me suspiciously, tears welling up. "What's this about?" I just looked at her and pressed record on my phone. "It's about everything, Sarah. About honesty. About what happens when someone you trust hurts you beyond words." I pulled out my phone, played the footage I'd been saving. Jack's voice was clear, laughing with that other girl, him touching her hand like she was the only woman in the world. Her reaction was priceless, her face blanched, her eyes darted away, and her hands shook. "Is this what I think it is?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Oh, I think you know exactly what it is," I said. "The truth, I've got the evidence, every message, every secret meeting. You thought you could hide it from me, huh?" She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was just confused. I didn't want to hurt you." "Too late for that," I snapped. "You betrayed me with my best friend, Sarah. You both thought I'd never find out, but I did, and now I'm done. I don't want to see you again, not as my girl, not as my friend. You've broken everything we had." She looked up at me, her desperation clear. "Can't we just talk, work this out?" "No," I said firmly. "You made your choice, Jack made his. If you think I'm just going to forgive and forget, you're dead wrong. This is the end of us and Jack. If I ever see you near me again, I'll make sure everyone knows what a snake you really are." That night, I handed her the keys to her apartment and told her to leave. I didn't want her any longer in my life, not after what I'd discovered. She begged, cried, tried to explain, but I shut her down. I felt nothing but cold resolve. I knew this was just the beginning, but I couldn't let them see me broken anymore. I had to be the one in control. As she disappeared out the door, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming what little dignity I had left. I sat alone in the dark, the evidence playing in my mind like a sick movie. My entire world had turned upside down, and I was left picking up the pieces. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The next step was to make sure Jack paid, not just with words but with actions. Because betrayal like this demands more than just tears, it demands consequences, and I was about to deliver them. The aftermath of the confrontation left me hollowed out, but oddly clearer. I'd finally put everything on display, the evidence, the truth, and I told Sarah what I thought of her. That moment felt like ripping off a Band-Aid, exposing all the raw, ugly wounds underneath. But I knew deep down that it wasn't enough to just cut her loose and move on. Jack needed to see what betrayal truly looked like in full force. I spent the next few days in a fog, but my mind was racing. I was already planning my revenge, something quiet but unavoidable. Jack had to understand the extent of what he'd done, and I decided the best way to do that was by breaking him in a way that would leave him no room to deny any of it. If I could make him feel the same pain I felt, then maybe I could start to heal. First, I started laying the groundwork. I contacted a friend who worked at a local locksmith shop. I told him I needed a set of spare keys, ones I could use to access Jack's apartment without raising suspicion. I didn't want to do anything reckless, but I had to be prepared. I also set up an email account using a fake name, one that I could use to send Jack messages without revealing who I was, just enough to stir the pot. I knew Jack's routines. He was the kind of guy who'd leave his door unlocked when he went out for a quick run or forget to change his security code after a night out. I'd studied his social media, and I knew he liked to stay out late, often at the same bar downtown, his favorite spot, where he always looked confident and untouchable. That was going to be my target. One night I got a message from the fake email suggesting I had some dirt on him, a little blackmail bait. I kept it vague but enough to make him wonder. I sent the message late when I knew he'd be at the bar, and I watched him reply, intrigued. "Who is this?" he texted back. "Just someone who knows what you've been doing," I shot back. "Meet me tomorrow and I'll tell you everything." I kept it simple. I didn't want him to realize I was the one behind it yet. I was building the tension, laying the trap. I knew he'd come running, desperate to find out who had this information. That's when I was going to strike. Meanwhile, I bought a small voice recorder, one that I could hide in my pocket. I wanted to catch Jack's reaction when I finally confronted him face to face. I imagined him squirming, trying to deny everything, his lies unraveling like a poorly stitched wound. The next evening, I sat at my kitchen table, heart pounding like a drum. I told Jack I'd meet him at that bar, and I waited. When I saw him stroll in, confident as ever, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. I kept my expression cold as I approached him. "Jack," I said, voice low but firm, "glad you could make it." He looked me over, surprised but trying not to show it. "Hey, what's this about?" I pulled out my phone, played the recording I'd hidden earlier. His words loud and clear, describing how he'd planned to keep seeing Sarah behind my back, his laughter, his casual lies, everything. His face turned white as he listened, and I saw the moment it hit him. The realization that I knew everything. He stammered, trying to protest. "Look, man, I didn't mean for." "Save it," I cut him off. "You betrayed me, Jack, my best friend. You thought I'd never find out, huh?" He looked desperate now, trying to explain, but I'd already made up my mind. I pulled the keys from my pocket and slid them across the table. "Here, your new keys, because I want you to have a little reminder of what happens when you cross me." His eyes flicked to the keys, then back to me. "You're crazy, man. You think this is gonna hurt me." "Oh, Jack," I said, voice cold and steady. "You haven't seen anything yet." I pulled out my phone, showing him the evidence I'd collected, texts, photos, everything. "This is just the beginning, and soon everyone's going to know what a snake you really are." He backed away, voice cracking. "You're overreacting. This isn't fair." "Fair?" I sneered. "You think betrayal is fair? You both played with my life like it was some game. Well, I'm about to make sure that game ends, and it ends badly for you." I could see the realization dawning on him that I was serious. My whole body felt like it had been clenched in rage, but I kept my voice level. No shouting, just quiet, deadly intent. I knew there was no turning back now. He'd be feeling the consequences soon enough. As he left, I stared after him, feeling that strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd taken a step forward, but I knew this wasn't over, not even close. The real fallout was coming. Jack might think he'd escaped, but I'd left a trail. I had the evidence, the keys, and a plan that was only just beginning to unfold. The question was, how much damage could I do before they realized I was serious? And what would be left of me once I finished? The answer was already in motion. I just needed to keep my head clear and follow through. Because betrayal like this demands a lesson, and I wasn't about to let them forget it. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog, but every step was deliberate. I'd finally set the stage, and now it was about execution. Jack thought he'd escaped, that his secret was safe behind the locked doors and his own arrogance. But I had everything I needed: evidence, keys, a plan. I wanted him to feel the sting the way I had felt that night at her apartment, that burning betrayal that refused to fade. I kept my distance from Sarah, knowing she'd mostly fade out of my life now that I'd made it clear I was done. My focus was on Jack, and I kept the secret weapon close, that recording, the photos, the keys. That was my ace. That night I parked my car a few streets away from Jack's place, just to keep from drawing attention. I had the recorder in my pocket, and I watched his window from a distance. His light was still on, the second-floor room he used as an office or maybe just a chill-out zone. I saw him pacing nervously, probably wondering what I was up to. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. I waited until he went out, the bar probably, or some other late-night spot. When the coast was clear, I slipped into the apartment building, the keys fitting perfectly into his front door lock. Quiet as a shadow, I crept inside. The apartment smelled of beer and greasy takeout. It was cluttered, but that was just Jack, comfortable in chaos. I knew where everything was. I quietly moved through, making sure I didn't knock anything over or leave fingerprints. My main goal was to find a private spot to set up the camera, somewhere Jack wouldn't notice until it was too late. I found a good spot above his desk, hidden behind some books. Perfect. I set the recorder there and double-checked that it was working. Then I pulled out the small camera I'd purchased, discreet, high quality. I aimed it at his main sitting area, making sure I captured everything, every move, every word. Once I clicked record, I knew I'd made my move. I stayed in the shadows, listening to him shout at his phone, probably drunk, probably nervous. He was talking to someone, laughing, then suddenly grew serious. I caught snippets of his voice, angry and defensive. Then I heard him say something that made my blood run cold. "I can't believe she's done this." I knew I couldn't trust her, but I didn't think she'd go this far. "I'll fix this." That's when I knew I had him right where I wanted. I left quietly, retracing my steps back out the way I came, making sure not to leave any trace. As I stepped into my car, I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. I'd got what I wanted: proof, silence, leverage. I could finally start making him see the damage he'd caused. The next morning, I sent him a text from a new number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the same spot tonight. No excuses." I wanted him to show up, to face what was coming. No more hiding, no more lies, just raw truth, and the fallout I knew was inevitable. He replied almost immediately, "What's this about? You better not be wasting my time." Good. That meant he was nervous. He knew I'd uncovered something, and I was about to make sure he understood that it wasn't just blackmail material. It was the end of everything he thought he had. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I printed out some of the evidence, screenshots, dates, the photos, and laid them out on my desk. I was going to show him how exposed he really was. I also bought a small bottle of whiskey, not to celebrate but to steady my nerves. I was about to do something I'd never done before, something I knew would change everything. Darkness fell, and I headed back to the bar. Jack was already there, nursing a drink, looking anxious. When I sat across from him, he tried to act confident, but I saw the tremor in his hand, the sweat on his brow. I slid my phone across the table. "I think you know what this is," I said softly, "but I want you to see it all." I pressed play on the video I'd hidden, his voice, his laughter, talking about how he was going to fix things with Sarah, how he hated being caught but didn't know how to stop. I watched his face turn pale, then red with anger and shame. "You thought I'd never find out," I said. "You thought I was stupid or blind, but I saw everything, Jack. The lies, the sneaking around, the way you used me. That's why I have the keys. I want you to have a reminder, one you won't forget anytime soon." He looked at the keys, then at me, eyes burning with something close to hatred. "You're nuts, man. You think locking me out is going to fix anything." "No," I said, "but it's a start. You betrayed me, and I'm not going to let you get away with it, not this time." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every word. I knew this was just the beginning of a reckoning. I handed him the keys, and as he reached for them, I added, "You're done, Jack, and so is Sarah. You both chose this path, and I'll make sure you live with the consequences." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I didn't care. This was justice, plain and simple. The fallout was about to come crashing down, and I was finally ready to face it. The ball was rolling now. No more hiding. No more pretending I wasn't hurt. Just raw, unfiltered revenge, and I knew it would be a lesson neither of them would forget. The night after I handed him those keys, I felt a strange calm settle over me, but it was like calm before a storm. I'd done everything I could to make Jack feel the full weight of his betrayal. I'd collected evidence, set traps, and finally confronted him face to face. Now all that was left was the fallout. I went home knowing I had the upper hand. I'd watched his face twist in shock and fury, seen the realization dawn on him that his lies had been exposed. That moment, knowing I had utterly dismantled his facade, felt like the only true victory I'd had in weeks, and it was enough to remind me that sometimes justice is just a matter of playing their own game. The following morning, I packed up that evidence in a sealed envelope. I printed out the photos, saved the videos, and put everything into a folder. I knew I had to make the final move. It was time to cut the cord once and for all. I walked to the local post office, my hands slightly trembling but my mind clear. As I handed over the sealed package to the clerk, I looked him in the eye. "Send this to Jack's work address," I said calmly. "Make sure it gets there today. No return address." He blinked, surprised by my tone, but nodded. I watched as he took it behind the counter. That was the last of it. Jack would get his wake-up call, public, undeniable end. Brutal. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the balcony. The city lights flickered below, and for once I didn't feel empty. Instead, I felt like I'd reclaimed part of myself. No longer a victim, but a survivor who finally took control. I called my sister, telling her everything. She was furious, crying and apologizing repeatedly. I told her she did the right thing by telling me, and that I appreciated her honesty. It hurt to hear her so upset, but I knew she was just as betrayed. The pain was real, but so was my resolve. Over the next few days, the fallout began. Jack's reputation took a hit. His coworkers started whispering, and his social media accounts mysteriously went silent. I didn't need to hear the gossip. I felt it in the air. Sarah. I blocked her number, deleted every photo, and made a clean break. I realized I'd been clinging to memories that no longer mattered. In the end, I understood something crucial. Betrayal leaves scars, but those scars can also serve as warning signs. I won't be naive again, and I won't let anyone make me feel small or stupid. That night, I took the keys back from Jack's house, walking away as the first light of dawn stained the sky. I didn't drop them. I handed them over, symbolically severing the ties that had bound me. Sitting there watching the sunrise, I felt an odd mixture of relief and strength. I'd lost a lot, but I'd gained something more valuable: control over my life. I learned that sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, even if it means burning bridges, exposing secrets, or standing alone in the aftermath. And if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Betrayal hurts, but it also teaches you your worth. When someone crosses that line, don't hesitate to stand up, fight back, and reclaim what's yours. Because in the end, no one can hurt you as badly as you let them, unless you let them. And I refuse to be a victim anymore.